Dhyana Yoga, and we are on text 18. So I'll hand over to you, Prabhuji. We can start with Mangalacharan if you want, or...
Okay. Do you want me to do the whole Mangalacharan?
Whatever, Prabhuji, it's you will tell us what we should do.
Class gives us this kind of a standard process, you know, for obeisances to the spiritual master, then Rupa Goswami.
Yes.
Then the assembled devotees, the Panchatattva, and then my mantra. If I did that, is that okay?
That's fine, Prabhuji. Thank you. We'll appreciate.
Okay. Om Jnana Tinandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militang Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manomistam Stapatang Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vankalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivacha Atitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhana Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama
એ લોકોને ગીતાનું એક દોહો લે અને then they have a session on that.
Okay. So we are studying 618 today. Let me just find the verse. You still want me to do I say, you say?
Yes, Prabhuji, yes, please, so that we get better.
Practice makes perfect, Srila Prabhupada says. No?
Yes.
So 618 then. Yada vinayatam chitam.
Yada vinayatam chitam.
Atmaneva vishtat. Well, let me try that again. Atmaneva vishtatate.
Atmaneya vitashtate.
Nishprita savakamebhyo.
Nishpriha sarvakamebhyo.
Yukta ityuchate tata.
Yukta iti uchyate tata.
Yada.
Yada.
When. Viniyatam.
Viniyatam.
Particularly disciplined. Chitam. Mind and its activities.
The mind and its
activities.
Atmani. In the transcendence. Eva. Certainly.
Avishishtate.
Becomes situated. Nishpriha. Devoid of desire. Sarva. For all kinds of. Kamebhyaha. Material sense gratification. Yuktaha. Well situated in yoga. Iti. Thus. Uchyate. Is said to be. Tada. At that time. So this is a translation by Srila Prabhupada. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. Please repeat, when the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities, and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga.
He's said to be well established in yoga.
Okay, so before I do the purport, I want to look back and connect this verse to what's going on in the chapter. Because in the purport, Prabhupada compares this with a devotee who's fully Krishna conscious. Because what's described here is Yoga Ruda. It's actually a very fixed stage of meditation. Because we shouldn't forget that in this chapter, we are studying Dhyana Yoga. So that is meditation on the super soul, actually. And previously, we discussed that there are two stages. There's Yoga Ruda, Yoga Ruksha and Yoga Ruda. So the Yoga Ruksha stage is when we work for purification. That's pretty much true in any yoga system, actually. And then when there's purity of heart, then actually one can enter into meditation. So what we're describing here from the 10th verse forward, it's actually quite a technical description of the process itself, the actual meditation process, how it should be done, where you should sit, how you should control the mind, all those kinds of things. So I just want to look back to the 10th verse and just give a resume of those verses and where we've come to here. So in the beginning, if we go back to 10th verse, you can all follow and have a look. 10th verse is the beginning of the description of the practice of yoga. This is a mechanical practice, step by step. So therefore, the preliminary things are somewhat technical and have to be done in a certain way. So that's what this description is a description of the stages in yoga practice. And we begin with basic things. So that's 10. The transcendental should always gauge his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. Should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind, should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. These are basic things which are required in order that one can advance in yoga practice. Because we shouldn't forget that this is actually a mechanical process of mind control and meditation, which is being described here. Then we come to where to sit. That is the next two verses, where to sit. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place. It has to be secluded because otherwise there'll be distractions. And should lay kusa grass on the ground. That's actually a sacred grass. And even I think you put the roots towards the east. I forget now which way you do it, but there's even a certain way of laying the kusa grass so it aids the meditation. Then cover it with a deer skin, because if you're going to go to a secluded place where there aren't many people, you may get bothered by snakes. So therefore the deer skin has that quality. It drives away the snakes. And then a soft cloth, because you're going to sit for a long time. We were looking at that photograph, or that painting rather. I wonder if I can find it quickly. We're looking for it now. Yeah, here it is. This picture. In this yoga practice, you may have to sit for a long time. This is the practice in Satya Yuga when people lived for 100,000 years. So, to give 40 or 50 or 60,000 years for your meditation wasn't a big deal, no? You can understand as well from the picture, you see the length of the nails and the hair and the emaciation of the body. You would have to sit for a long time. Oh, I've lost my place. Sorry about that, I lost my place. Yes, cover it with a deerskin and soft cloth. You'll have to sit for a long time. Then the seat should be neither too high nor too low. Because if it's too high, you may get bothered by weather conditions. And if it's too low, it may flood. So therefore you pick a place which is neither too high nor too low. So when you go there and you sit, hopefully you won't be disturbed. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and situated in a sacred place. Because, we need all the assistance we can get. In this yoga process, one has to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps. It's not like Bhakti Yoga where you get help. You get assistance from the devotees, from Krishna. In this yoga practice, it's mechanical. It's based on your own strength of practice. So therefore, sacred place is good because it helps. The yoga should then sit upon it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities, and fixing the mind on one point. So this is where to sit by practicing, and then how to sit comes next. Actually, I used to do this meditation system for about 3 years. My teacher used to tell me that your back, your head, and your neck should be like a pile of coins. So Krishna's saying that pretty much the same thing here. one should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line. Because I actually used to do that with Gurukul boys sometimes. We used to practice this. Because generally when we sit, our posture is not so good. But if you sit in lotus or half lotus and straighten the body like that, it actually aligns the life airs, and you can feel the difference actually. So when you sit very straight like this, it's an assistance because the life airs actually line up. And stare steadily at the tip of the nose, with half closed eyes. The idea is if you close your eyes, you may fall asleep. And if they're open, then you may get distracted. So the idea is to sit with half closed eyes and stare at the tip of the nose, because the next thing is to practice pranayama, which means that we become aware of the breath entering and leaving the nostrils. So the idea is to focus everything on one point, the tip of the nose, where the breath is coming and going. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, because that's also a big impediment to having a steady mind. Generally, we find that our activities are concerned with gain and safety. You know, fear is something we think about a lot when we're in the normal state of wakefulness. You know, we're worried about what is this situation going to be safe? And what am I going to get out of the situation? A major activity of the mind, actually, to be fearful. It is the place of fearfulness. So with an unagitated, subdued mind, you know, we studied that a little earlier, that the mind that's subdued and under control is the friend of the meditator, actually. When the mind is uncontrolled, then it's the greatest enemy. So the mind is to be subdued like a mill pond. Krishna actually used the example of a lamp in a windless place. Lamp in a windless place just burns steadily, isn't deviated. So subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free of sex life, because this place is Maituna Agara. It's described like that. Maituna Agara means a prison house of sex desire. That is the principle which is binding in the material world. You could say it's the ball and chain which keeps everyone in the material nature. Because if we have that desire, then...
Prabhuji, you have muted yourself by mistake.
Thank you. I also noticed a little bit after you did. That is the pinnacle of material enjoyment, is sex life. And it is the principle which binds one here. There's no bars or locks or chains in the material world, because this material world, the prison house, is the sex desire. That is what keeps one bound up. So in order to be successful as a meditator, one has to be completely free of sex desire. Brahmacharya, actually, means that one shouldn't even think about it in one's dreams, what to speak of anywhere else, no? And should behave in such a way that those thoughts are not elucidated, that they come into the mind. That's why Krishna says they're completely free of sex life. One should meditate upon me in the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Not easy, actually. Not easy at all. So that is how to sit in meditation. We're coming to, when we get that together, there are results. There are certain results. So thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities. The mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence. That's what, if we look back, that was the discussion in the first 3 verses. For one is neophyte in the yoga system, work, activity is said to be the means. And for one is advanced in the yoga system, cessation of material existence or cessation of all material activities is the means. And we learn as well from this discussion that in the beginning, one needs to work in a dutiful way to purify the heart. And if one doesn't do that, one meditates or simply think of material sense gratification. And then we learned as well going forward that not only one has to be free of material sense gratification, but give up the desire even to completely distance oneself so that there is no material activity at all. So that's what Krishna is saying here, by cessation of material activity, nothing, just focus on the super soul and nothing else. And then 16 and 17, that's more results actually, more practices, because as one advances, then one must be more careful. So then one must don more careful behavior in order that one doesn't get deviated. Well, I think we discussed that before, you know. If we can get some understanding of how difficult this process is, we can look to Vishwamitra Muni. He's a very famous personality, Ramayan personality. He's Chiranjeev, actually. It was the whole duration of the universe. So he was meditating, and Indra became worried that he might take the post. So he sent Menaka from the spiritual world, from the heavenly planets, I beg your pardon. And the idea was that she was supposed to deviate him. So what happened was that he was meditating for 64,000 years. And from we learned earlier on, this process has 8 limbs. There's yama and niyama, which means internal and external purity, different kinds of rules and regulations, asana, learning to sit, pranayama, learning to control the breath. And if that's perfected, the breath actually stops. Then there's withdrawing the mind from sense objects. That's called pratyahara. So after 64,000 years, Vishwamitra Muni hadn't perfected that, the pratyahara stage of withdrawing the mind from sense objects. And how do we know that? Because the dancing ankle bracelets, the ankle bracelets of Menaka, broke his meditation. So from this, we can get some understanding of how difficult this process is. Extremely difficult. Can't be practiced in this age, actually. But it's part of the discussion, because here we're studying the yoga ladder, the different stages, step-by-step process, how one would come actually to bhakti yoga. So this is like tighter control. This is more practices. There is no possibility of one becoming yogi if one eats too much or too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. In other words, moderation is required. Too much austerity hardens the heart, and not enough austerity, there's no ability to control the mind. So it has to be balanced, very carefully balanced. And then 17 is a very famous verse, actually. He was regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, and recreation and work, can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. But it's not based, it has to be based on moderation, on doing what is required to maintain the body. Not too austere, but not too loose either. So we can understand from these verses, just from 10 to 17, how difficult this process is. And now we come in this verse, you could say this is pretty much Yoga Ruda. It's pretty fixed, actually, that the meditation is deep and steady. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he's said to be well established in yoga. And why well established? Because it's beginning now. We haven't reached the end, actually. This is the stage where one is aware that one is pure spirit soul. That's actually what sustains it, that one is aware I am pure spirit soul. It's Brahman realization, actually, that I am Brahman and everything else is Brahman. I may be still an individual, but everything is Brahman, actually. So therefore, there's no connection with the material nature. And from that state comes something called Brahmananda. Brahmananda is the bliss that one achieves by the realization that I'm pure spirit soul and have nothing to do with the material body. Of course, that's, although Krishna does say a little later that a yogi who attains that stage thinks there's no greater gain, it's not the end, actually. Because Rupa Goswami, he compares the 3 kinds of happiness in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, let's consider, before we discuss this pure devotional service, let's consider this business of happiness. So he says there's 3 kinds of happiness. There's so-called material happiness, there's Brahmananda, and there's the bliss that one attains by practice of pure devotional service. So he compares them. And he says, this material happiness, we shouldn't really even bother talking about that because it's so insignificant. It's not really happiness. And then he says this Brahmananda, the bliss that one achieves by the realization that one is pure spirit and nothing else. So he says that's like a drop of water compared with the ocean of devotional service. But Krishna does say a little later that yogi who achieves this state thinks there's no greater gain. So it's a pretty amazing state. And that's what sustains this state, actually. That one is focused on the self. And Krishna even says, actually, that yogi enjoys the knowledge within himself, that he's pure spirit soul. And that's why Krishna is saying here is well established in yoga. He's established, but there's further to go. So it's a very steady state. And that's why in the purport, Prabhupada makes a certain kind of comparison. So this is where we've got to, in this chapter. And we're studying the different stages, the build-up Ashtanga yoga, leading to samadhi, actually, leading to a fixed state of consciousness, one focused on the supersoul. But we haven't got there yet. This is the Brahman platform which is being described here. Okay, the purport's very interesting because of the comparison that Prabhupada makes. So I'm going to read the purport now. The activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires. You may remember in second chapter when Arjuna asked about that. Krishna said, if you practice this renounced work, not trying to enjoy the results of your activities, you can actually come to the transcendence, the transcendental state. And Arjuna asked, he said, oh yes, what are the symptoms of a person who's thus merged in transcendence? And Krishna answered that by saying there's no material sense gratification. That's actually the primary qualification. So the same thing here. The activities of a yoga are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires. Not only the activity, but also the desires. Because one may stop the activity, but the desires may continue in the heart. We looked at that in third chapter. Krishna was saying one who's like that is mityachar. He's false, he's a pretender. He's deluding himself. So not only the activity has to be given up, but the desire has to be given up as well. We looked at that in the 8th verse, actually, last time I gave class. Okay, so cessation of all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. Sex is the chief. It's the pinnacle of material sense gratification. So that has to be removed, at all costs, because that is the central point of attraction. Actually, the Chaitanya Charitamrita says that there is no illusion so complete as that which arises from the attraction between a man and a woman. It's the basic principle of material life, actually. So this is why Prabhupada is saying here, of which sex is the chief, this attraction for the opposite sex. It's the binding force of this material nature. So then a perfect yogi who is well disciplined in activities of the mind, that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. So it's very steady. It's very, very steady. Like the wind, the flame in the windless place. There's an expression in English, as quiet or as still as a mill pond. A mill pond is a body of water which is used to drive the old-fashioned way of grinding corn. The water comes on the mill race, and it goes through the wheel, and the wheel turns the two stones which grind the corn. So if it's not moving, then the pond where the water is kept is very still. So it's like that, very still, not disturbed by any material desire, like a lamp in a windless place. The perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm going to read these verses in a minute. Notice Prabhupada says automatically, because what we're studying is a mechanical process. So we discussed this last week, if you have to go to the top of the Empire State Building, what would you rather do? Would you like to use the staircase, or would you like to use the lift? So the sensible thing to do is to get into the lift and push the button. The mechanical process is walking up the stairs. So this is why Prabhupada is saying here automatically, because Prabhupada is now going to compare these two states. The yogi, who by cessation of material activities is well established in yoga, and actually we're going to compare with Ambarish Maharaj, who's a pure devotee, and actually is so expert in the practice that he engaged in all 9 processes of devotional service at the same time, actually. He was so expert. So these 3 verses that we're getting from 9th canto are describing that, this Ambarish Maharaj. Actually, when we consider the 9 processes, there is a study of which personality is perfected, which process. Like hearing, for instance, is Maharaj Parikshit. He attained perfection by hearing the Bhagavatam. Then there's Shukadev Goswami, who attained perfection by reciting it. Then there's Prahlad Maharaj, who attained perfection by remembering Lord Krishna. Then there's Prithu Maharaj, who attained perfection by worshipping Lord Krishna. I missed out Lakshmi Devi, actually. Lakshmi Devi attained perfection by serving Krishna's lotus feet. Then there's Akrura, whose prayers are something very special. He attained perfection through prayer. So in this way, different devotees are held as an example. Like becoming the servant was Hanuman. If you open Hanuman's heart, you just see Sita and Ram, nothing else. In fact, there's a famous story of Hanuman which really illustrates this point. Especially if you go to India, you'll see deities of Hanuman are either orange or red. You often see that. The deity is just orange or red. So the story from Ramayana goes like this. But one time after the Battle of Lanka, kind of Hanuman was hanging around. He didn't really know what to do. So he would often hang around with Sita or Ram and just get their association, see if he could do anything to serve them. So this one time, Sita Devi had just finished getting dressed and Hanuman came there and she was busy putting the sindoor on the parting in her forehead like that. So Hanuman asked, what is that you're doing? So she said, it's sindoor and it's very auspicious for Lord Ramachandra if I wear it. And at that moment, then Hanuman ran away. And when he came back, he was completely covered from head to foot in sindoor. And Sita Devi told him, why did you do that? But he said, you told me it's auspicious for Lord Ramachandra. So I thought I should do that. I should just cover myself in. So Hanuman is becoming the friend. And Prithu Maharaj actually, because the last of the processes of pure devotional service is actually surrendering everything. So Ambarish Maharaj is famous for that he surrendered, he did everything. He did all the 9 processes actually. So this is what's described here. Savai Mana Krishna Padana Vindayo Achangsi Vaikantha Gananavanane Kara Harimandira Majanadishu Chutin Chakara Chuta Sat Katodaye. Anyway, I'm not going to chant all of it. There's no real necessity for that, but we'll read the translation. Because these verses actually, Prabhupada is equating the state which we have in the yogi and the state which the devotee is fully engaged in Krishna's service. They both have the same state. But Prabhupada is pointing out here that it's automatic in the case of the devotee. But in the case of the yogi, it's extremely troublesome to come to this platform and even to maintain it. So Prabhupada is, because these processes which are explained in this chapter are not really applicable in this age. You can perform the process, but there'll be no spiritual benefit. And the reason for that is because in this age we find that the general mass of people have certain characteristics which kind of exclude them from this yoga practice, especially that their minds are always disturbed. And we were learning that in this whole process is mind control actually. So this can't be practiced in this age actually. It's not possible. People are too disqualified by their shortness of life, by their unluckiness, their misguidedness, their tendency to commit mistakes, so many things, and especially because their minds are always disturbed. So many things are there, so many calamities which keep the mind in a disturbed state. So no one can really practice this in this age. But Prabhupada is pointing out, though, that the same platform can be achieved automatically by a devotee who's practicing the process of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. So this is the translation of these 3 verses. King Ambarish first engaged his mind in the lotus feet of the Lord. We find Krishna has told us that in the Bhagavad Gita, actually. Engage mind and always thinking about me. It's the primary instruction of Bhagavad Gita. Then, one after another, he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Because the voice, it's a working sense. It needs engagement. So Ambarish Maharaj engaged his voice in chanting the glories of the Lord. His hands in mopping the temple of the Lord. Hands are working sense also, needs engagement. His ears in hearing the activities of the Lord. Knowledge acquiring sense, engaged in Krishna's service. His eyes in seeing the transcendental form of the Lord. Again, working sense, engaged in Krishna's service. His body in touching the body of the devotees. Because it's said that one can make a lot of advancement just by touching the bodies of the devotees. They're Krishna's internal potency, actually. And especially in the beginning of our devotional life, our relationship with Krishna is mostly through the devotees, actually, because we don't have that connection with Krishna. So this is a very important thing. Without the devotees, actually, we can't really practice devotional service effectively. Prabhupada once said that 90% of our advancement is coming from the relationship we have with the devotees. So that's a very important thing. Touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell, in smelling the scents of the lotus flower offered to the Lord. Again, working sense, or knowledge acquiring sense, engaged in Krishna's service. His tongue and tasting the tulasi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. Of course, that can be expanded, especially the tulasi leaf actually, but it can be expanded, anything that's been offered to Krishna. But to engage, the tongue has two functions, to vibrate and to taste. So both of them must be engaged. Actually, that's the prayer of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur before we take prasadam, that those two things engaged in the service of the Lord. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, you very mercifully have given this prasadam so that we can taste the food which has been offered to your Lordship and we can chant the holy name. And this way the tongue is fully engaged. Because the tongue is very wicked, actually. The tongue is a very wicked, it always wants to talk some nonsense. No? So the tongue is very wicked and difficult to control. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that the prasadam has been given and the holy name so that the tongue can be controlled. Tasting the tulsi leaf offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage in the temple of the Lord. Again, working sense, engaged in Krishna's service. His head in offering obeisances to the Lord, his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. So this is Ambarish Maharaj, every possible way engaged in Krishna's service in one way or another. And then actually one is perfectly situated in yoga, actually, just like this yoga, which is this yogi who's being described in this verse, steady, not disturbed by material desires, no, very steady. But the devotee can automatically achieve the same platform in a much, much easier way, actually. We just have to start wherever we are, engage in Krishna's service as much as we can, and gradually try to increase. Because that's what sadhana bhakti means. Sadhana bhakti means to practice the process which we will engage in when we go back to the spiritual world, to perfect it in this situation. So wherever we are is great. We may not be an Ambarish Maharaj. We may not be on that platform where we're engaging everything, 100% in Krishna's service. We may be 5%, maybe 6%, 7%, 10%, 20%. That's great wherever we are. It doesn't matter wherever we are, actually. We should be honest about where we are, but then have the desire to increase, to do the things which would gradually increase so that we become more and more absorbed. And we can meditate on Ambarish Maharaj, who kind of got the whole thing together very nicely. We can meditate like that. But we may not be on that platform in the beginning, so we should be honest about where we're at and do what works for us. But then we should also have the desire to move forward, take baby steps, do a little more, do something more for Krishna's service, so that gradually we're increasing. That's what Srila Prabhupada calls the progressive march back to Godhead. It should be progressive. The tendency can be in devotees to become, what's the word I want? Complacent. We can become complacent. I'm chanting my 16 rounds, I give a nice class, I'm doing some service. That's a dangerous state, actually, to be complacent. We must rather always look for ways how we can increase so that our consciousness can become like Maharaj Ambarish, completely absorbed, actually, in every possible way, mind, body, words, and even the intelligence. That's what our sannyasis vow, that the whole jiva, everything, is engaged in Krishna's service. So in that way, actually, there's a very nice purport because it can be a meditation for us, to work towards the state of Ambarish Maharaj with whatever capacity we have. And we find as we take steps forward as well, Krishna will help. Krishna helps us, actually. I give the intelligence by which they come to me, Krishna says in 10th chapter. Very important verse, actually. Krishna is described in the relationship between his devotees and himself. Initially, the relationship of the devotees, he sees Krishna as the Supreme Lord, the source of everything. And as a result of that, actually, he engages in Krishna's service with all his heart. And then the devotees are always conversing with each other, talking about may they achieve transcendental bliss through that. That's the devotee's side of the relationship. And then Krishna's side is he gives the intelligence by which the devotee can come to him. We don't come by our own power, actually. It's not that we're great devotees and we come to Krishna's lotus feet like that. Actually, Krishna does that for us. When he sees our attempt, but the point is that we have to make an attempt. We shouldn't just become complacent and just think, well, whatever I'm doing is great, No, we should always try to move forward. So in that way, Maharaj Ambarish's example can be a nice meditation for us. So Prabhupada is quoting here because it's equivalent. And Prabhupada is pointing out it's automatic for a devotee, not that we have to go through all these stages. I mean, even to learn to sit is a difficult thing. When I used to do this, I would sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes, drilling pranayama, and the body will bother you. Get an itch here or an ache there, or you hear some sound outside. Things will bother you. It's very, very difficult to do this, but it's so easy for a devotee. And the reason it's so easy is because we're used to doing things. We're used to being active. Krishna was saying in 3rd chapter, 4 reasons why you have to work. That is what we used to. So rather, we don't stop working, but rather we shift the object of the results of that work. Instead of I, me, and mine, it becomes Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. That is the idea of it. And the process is so wonderful, it doesn't matter where you're situated. Gradually, we can all do that. I was just reading, I was researching something else earlier today, and I was reading a passage where Prabhupada was in a room conversation with some guests, and one guest asked Srila Prabhupada, do you have to come to the temple? Can you stay at home and be a devotee? And Prabhupada said, oh yes, you can stay at home. We don't actually have to change too much in our lives except our consciousness, to move our consciousness, my, me, and mine, to Krishna, 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 as much as we can, according to our ability. And as we make that endeavor, Krishna will open doors for us. I give the intelligence by which they'll come to me. Oh yes, I could do that. So Krishna will actually guide us and bring us to his lotus feet if we simply make the endeavor. We can see that just a few weeks ago, we were chanting this prayer every day, about how Krishna is running from the wooden grinding mortar in fear of Mother Yashoda, and he's being chased with a stick. And then we find out actually that no matter how hard Mother Yashoda tried to bind Lord Krishna, he was unsuccessful, always short by 2 fingers. So those 2 fingers represent something. They represent the endeavor of the devotee and Krishna's mercy. So if we don't endeavor, we can't expect Krishna's mercy, but also we're nothing without Krishna. So we have to make the endeavor, and then Krishna reciprocates. So if we become complacent and we stop trying, then our spiritual life goes into stasis. We kind of get, we think we're comfortable and everything's okay, but then gradually begin to slip backwards. That's what actually tends to happen. So we have to try to move forward. I've seen this in many devotees, actually, in my association with trying to become a devotee, that when we become complacent and we stop trying, we tend to slip backwards little by little. And then often devotees get into trouble. So we have to make that endeavor to move forward. To whatever we've got is great. Krishna actually says that in 9th chapter, I carry what you lack and I preserve what you have. So we have to have that mentality to move forward. Krishna will preserve for us, but we have to make the endeavor to move forward. Otherwise, the danger is we'll slip backwards. So these 3 verses, which Prabhupada has quoted, is a really nice meditation. What Ambarish Maharaj is doing. Okay, so then there's the last paragraph of the purport. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonal path. You see, Prabhupada in his purports and his presentation of Krishna consciousness is always careful to remind us about the dangers of the impersonal path, and how the impersonal path is, first of all, very difficult. Krishna himself says in 12th chapter, but then also the flaws and the dangers, because impersonalism is very common in our society, actually. It's very common everywhere, impersonalism. It's invaded the main religious systems. We have a tendency to be impersonal because of our contact with the material nature. So Prabhupada is always very careful to remind, and show the flaws in the impersonal path so that we get a clear understanding. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonal path. You know, because how can you, after all, how can you meditate on the inconceivable? That's what actually Krishna says in 12th chapter. You have to meditate on the inconceivable. How is that possible? So how to express it even? So this is what Prabhupada's pointing out here. But it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness. What a contrast. Prabhupada often does this in his purports, actually. He will show our path and he'll contrast it with the impersonal path, or will contrast it with materialistic activity, just to keep reminding us, you know, that what we need to do is to move forward on this path. Because by comparison with the impersonal path, all this stepwise process of Ashtanga Yoga is very easy by comparison, actually. This is why Prabhupada is saying it becomes very easy and practical. Because how practical is this? To go to a solitary place, find yourself some kushagraph, a deerskin, a soft cloth, neither too high nor too low. Make sure you're not disturbed. You probably got to go to the Himalayas and lock yourself in a cave to find a place like that. And to even find a place to meditate is very difficult. What to speak of anything else? What to speak of the practice? But for a devotee, it's very, very easy. We were just studying that today, actually, as well. I was researching for another class, and Prabhupada was saying that our process is very, very easy by comparison with these other Vedic processes. So where are we? It becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent from the above description of the engagements of Maharaj Ambarish. In other words, it's a question of engaging ourselves. Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevana, Bhakta, Uchite. That the process is to engage our senses in the service of the Lord of the senses, because Krishna is the original Lord of the senses. So that is the process. We just have to do that. Somehow or other engage our senses in the service of the Lord of the senses. Where is Rishikesha? The Lord, the Isha of the Rishas. The Rishas are the senses. And Isha is another name for Krishna, meaning the Lord. So we simply have to do that. Gradually increase as much as we possibly can. So Prabhupada saying it's very easy, just to meditate on this personality and try and follow in his footsteps a little bit. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. Unless you fix, unless there's a fixity on the lotus feet of the Lord, it's impractical, actually. It actually can't be done. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engagement, all the senses in the service of the Lord. That is what's required, actually, to become absorbed completely, total communion, by gradually practicing and increasing total communion. And then actually the material nature just fades into the background. That's what Prabhupada means when he says become a fixed up devotee. You see that in so many of Srila Prabhupada's purports. You say, we become fixed up devotee. By that he means at least the stage of Nishta. When our devotional service is steady, we've substantially removed anartas from the heart, unwanted things that block our devotional service. We become steady. And then pretty much it's down to the mercy of other devotees from that stage, Ruchi, Shakti. It goes like that. But at least by careful practice, we should try to come to the platform of Nishta. It's explained to be like pushing a car up a hill. I don't know if you've ever broken down in a car and you've had to push the car up the hill. Have you ever had that experience? How easy is it? Push a car up a hill. Not easy, no. But once you get to the top of the hill, then if you're not careful, if you let the car go, it'll just run on its own. So our practice up to Nishta is a bit like that. It requires a lot of serious endeavor in the beginning to stick to the process, to stick to the rules and regulations, chant our rounds carefully. Then once we get to that Nishta stage, it becomes much, much easier. Actually, the practice is then very steady. So it's just transcendental. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, engaging the sense in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. You can't avoid that, actually. We're active by nature. Krishna was saying in 3rd chapter, you will be forced by your nature. He said, you can't even do nothing for Kshaman. Just a blink of an eye, we can't do nothing for that time. So the senses require engagement. And if we don't engage them in Krishna's lotus feet, in the service of the Lord, they'll be engaged in Maya. Because there's no other choice. There's no third choice. And we can't do this where we hold the senses still. I have practical experience of that actually. When I used to do pranayama, after like an hour and a half, 2 hours, I tell my teacher I'm exhausted. And he used to tell me, yes, that's very good. Because that means, we'll work holding the mind still for 2 hours. You're exhausted afterwards, completely exhausted. So he'd say, yes, this is very good. Well, I look back on that now and I think, what an idiot, But anyway, that is how difficult it is to hold the mind still. It's not possible, actually, because it requires engagement. So therefore, by comparison, to engage it in Krishna's lotus feet in different ways is much, much easier. We require engagement. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Just try it. Go sit somewhere for 10 minutes and try and do nothing and see how easy it is. It's very, very difficult, actually, even for a few minutes, just to do nothing. Very difficult. Focus on the inconceivable, the absolute and undissociated. Even just to describe it sounds a bit scary. How do you fix your mind on that? So abnegation is not practical. To try and restrain the senses by artificial means, it's not really practical. It may have been practical for, the Satya Yuga, when everyone was Brahmin, and they lived 100,000 years. So, there were no Kshatriyas even at that time. Everyone was Brahmin. They're just focused, just sitting in meditation. But it's not possible in this age, not practical. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is the perfect process of transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad Gita, proper use, yukta vairagya, everything used in Krishna's service. That is, and that means gradual though, we have to build up. We start with something. Me, I started with 1 round a day. I would walk to work and I would chant my 1 round. And over 2 years, it built up to 16. That's what we start. Be honest wherever we're at and let it develop naturally. Put some endeavor. Let it grow. Let it grow. Let it grow. Wherever we are, we need that actually. Unless we are on the platform of Prema Bhakti, we need to meditate a little bit on, okay, now what else can I do in my life to draw me closer to Krishna's lotus feet? What endeavor can I put in? What baby step can I take? That must be our meditation wherever we are actually. Wherever we are in the process is wonderful, but we should try to develop ways to move forward. We can ask our friend devotees, our seniors, look, this is where I'm at in my life. What can I do to move forward? How can I become more absorbed? So that we can come to this steady platform, and finish up our business in this lifetime and get out of this material world. Prabhupada says it's possible in 1 lifetime. It is possible, actually. Compared with, the Shabari Muni, there would be a picture of that in Bhaktivedanta Manor when I started as a devotee. When you walk down the corridor of Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, there's a picture on the right-hand side of Shabari Muni. And he's so expert in meditation, he's got his pranayama together, he's meditating under the water. I mean, if you're meditating under the water, that means you must have stopped breathing. So he'd done that, But unfortunately, there were 2 fishes who were mating and they were very close to him. And that is a certain vibration, actually, sex life, and it broke his meditation. It broke his meditation. So, even for these great personalities who can do things like meditate under the water, it can so easily be broken. As Krishna says, any one of the senses in which the mind focuses can take you away completely. Shabari Muni and Vishwamitra Muni, 2 examples. But for us, this process is so wonderful because we're engaging our senses, which is what we do anyway, but just the object is Krishna instead of the object is me. So this is why Prabhupada says very easy in many places, actually. He says very easy because it's what we're used to doing. We just have to shift the subject of that endeavor. Instead of I, me, and mine, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And this example that Prabhupada's giving here of Ambarish Maharaj is a very nice meditation. Look how wonderfully Ambarish Maharaj did it. What can I do to increase? Anyway, so there's a few minutes left. I wanted to ask His Grace Madan Gopal Prabhu if he'd like to add anything, because I know I've listened to your class a few times. I know what a great devotee you are. So I wanted to ask you, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, thank you so much, bro. I'm not hardly a devotee, definitely not great anyway, but I really appreciated your point. I just want to express my appreciation. The point you made that the process that Srila Prabhupada has given is an active process compared to the somewhat passive nature of the meditation, where an activity is something we're used to anyway. So it's a much easier transition from what we do to a Krishna conscious lifestyle compared to a dhyana yoga based lifestyle. So I want to appreciate that. And at the same time, also, I wanted to mention that there are certain aspects of what's taught in this chapter, at least somewhat applicable to our practice. Like, of course, we're not going to go too high, too low, and the kusha grass and all that, but certain aspects of it, like, with your spine straight up, Srila Prabhupada does tell us in the middle of our japa tape, said properly, so there's something to that, to sitting properly. So there's whatever we can do to maximize or optimize our japa, for example. And if it'll be similar to the principles taught in the dhyana yoga, not everything, but there's certain aspects that we want to appreciate and try to implement as far as possible. Just want to mention that.
Point. Nice point. Actually, I'm just remembering a picture of Srila Prabhupada, which I have on my computer, where Prabhupada is chanting his Gayatri, and he's sitting completely erect, like that when he's chanting his Gayatri. So yeah, it's a very nice point. Actually, you can try that for yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
Try sitting in a very slouch-like way, and then sit in the way that Krishna describes, and you can feel the difference. Actually, you can actually feel it. It sharpens your attention. It's a very nice point you made, Madam Prabhu. Thank you very much. Very nice point.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Is it okay to ask a question?
It is.
Hare Krishna. I wondered, in the 3 stages you mentioned, and the first one is Brahmananda stage.
Yeah.
Of happiness. In pure spirit, how would you, you said focus on the self. How would you explain self against selflessness?
See, when we talk about the self in that sense of when someone is in the state of Brahmananda, that they have no connection with the material nature and they understand they're not the body. That is based initially on understanding that I am spirit, I am pure spirit, and I have no connection with this material nature. And that produces the state of Brahmananda. And then also in that state, one gets the sense of wanting to turn inwards and meditate. That's how it develops, actually. So that state begins with understanding what I actually am, that I'm Brahman, actually. Of course, I'm not Para-Brahman, the supreme. But at least the realization comes that I am pure spirit soul, and actually everything is pure spirit. That's that state. And then from that, one develops a desire to turn inward and meditate, and then comes some understanding of the super soul. So when we talked about the self, that's what we meant, the real, not, because that word Atma can mean many things. It can mean the even. But here, when we use that word self, that's what we mean, the real self, that we are pure spirit soul and we're nothing to do with the material nature. I don't know if that answers your question, Jolie.
Yes, thank you. Very good. Also, the other part is holding your mind still for up to 2 hours, because most of our lectures are 2 hours and over. Is that practical? Because when you think about it, our concentration goes after so long, and it's not long. How can you take in whatever you're learning for 2.5 hours? It's very difficult, I find, anyway.
Difficult. I agree. Actually, we find in most human beings after about 40 minutes, the ability to focus is kind of not so much. I'll tell you what I used to do. I used to sit with a diary and take notes. That's a good way of kind of staying alert. Try and not take the main points and what the speaker is saying. What are you doing that's 2.5 hours? I wanted to ask you.
Oh, well, we do have sometimes, we have BV group, which is meant to be 2 hours and sometimes go more. Bhakti Vriksha.
Bhakti Vriksha, 2 hours. I think you need to ask your speaker to give you a break in the middle or something like that.
We don't.
Taking
We have,
notes.
I
Go
must
on.
say, it's very engaging because we read and then we all take a turn to see, check your view. What do you make of it? And that, so it's fun as well. It's not just lecture. So you get involved.
Okay, that's wonderful.
The bit that Prabhu just said about chanting, how do you keep erect? Well, what about people who've got bone problems, muscle problems, physical bits? That isn't it most important that you're comfortable to really perform these duties? I'm talking about materialistic. We're not at the spiritual level yet, but
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You see, in the beginning, we need to put ourselves in a situation where we can chant peacefully and focus, whatever that is for you, whatever it is.
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, because the main thing is to hear Krishna's, the name vibration of Krishna's.
Yes.
So whatever works for you, you know, you can do that and you can focus on Krishna's names. That is what you should do. You see, Prabhupada is describing a stage where one is very serious and one is, you know, is looking for fine things to refine the chanting so that, you know, we can focus more and more and more. So you could say that's fine detail, to sit with your back and your neck and your head erect like a pile of coins. You know, but if we can't do that, it's fine. You see, our practice is so wonderful that actually there are no rules. The illustration of that is that one time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went into the toilet. When he came out of the toilet, he was biting his tongue like this. So the devotees were saying, why are you biting your tongue? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, my tongue is a rascal. It just wants to chant the holy name. It's not clean. So you shouldn't chant there, no? So there was one boy there called Gopal. He was just a young boy. And he told Mahaprabhu, but what happens if you leave your body in the toilet? Wouldn't you want to chant? And Mahaprabhu thought for a moment. He said, yes, that's true, actually. So we should even chant in the toilet. And Gopal said, yes, you should chant in the toilet. So then this shows, you know, that is the ultimate, that there are no rules and regulations. Actually, it became, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, yes, that's good. You become my guru. So that boy, Guru Gopal Goswami, he became actually. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you're my guru, you've instructed me. So that really shows us that chanting the holy name of the Lord can be done any place, anytime, anywhere.
Wonderful.
Sit like
apologies, apologies to the group to take up so much time. Thank you, because your talk was so rich. I really gathered quite a few points, and that's so important to me. Thank you, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thank you very much, Joli Mataji. Please join us every day as you are, and especially Sunday we have Shyamanand Krishna Prabhu with
Oh,
us.
really? Okay, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Nice to meet you, Joli. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. Hare Krishna.
So should I answer the three questions?
Yes, on the chat, there are some questions.
So this is from Vishal Agarwal. In this meditative stillness, does all thought cease? What feeling is one left with? You see, thought can't cease completely because we're dynamic by nature. The spirit soul is dynamic. You can't stop it. The thing is, the object of meditation becomes different. In our current state, we mostly meditate on different kinds of sense gratification, trying to connect the senses where they're objects, and the mind is the center of that, you know? But when we develop this thing of withdrawing our mind from the senses, then it's got to focus on something. Initially, we're focused on the fact that we're pure spirit soul, you know? But then gradually, as the meditation deepens, then gradually the super soul comes into the picture. So thought doesn't cease. Actually, the super soul is incredibly beautiful. So that's what, you know, one just becomes absorbed in the beauty of the super soul, actually. Initially, that we're spirit, that occupies the thought. Krishna says that the yogi enjoys the knowledge within himself, but then gradually awareness of the spirit of the super soul develops. And then actually the super soul is so attractive, so beautiful, that one can't withdraw one's consciousness from the super soul because it's just so engaging. Super soul is so beautiful. And the feeling one's left with, I described that, that's called Brahmananda initially. We can't imagine how wonderful that state is in our current state. We get drops of that, you know, through the devotional process. We get little drops sometimes. You know, when you lose yourself in kirtan, or you taste the prasadam and it's just so amazing. or you become engrossed in the association of devotees or studying the scripture. We get drops of that state. It's called ananda. It's not like material happiness, actually. And there's something about it which you instinctively understand. This state I'm in now is not like material happiness. It's different. It's deeper. And actually, as we develop spiritually, that wonderful feeling develops more and more, actually. It's called ananda bodhivardhanam. It means an ever-increasing ocean of spiritual bliss. But when in this state, what we're talking about here with the yogi, the state is initially understanding I'm pure spirit soul. It's called Brahmananda. And it's a taste which is so wonderful, it makes the greatest material sense gratification look like nothing. It actually becomes so paltry and insignificant that one would never go back to it, having tasted it. Vishal, is that all right?
Hare Krishna, yes, that answers my question. And I think I followed up with another one because I think
Okay,
you really
you
answered the question, with what you described, that state of ultimate bliss that we're left with.
Yes.
And I've had glimpses of that, through practicing detachment and focusing on the permanent. But my next question then says, I come out of it quite often, and that's the frustration I'm left with, especially with people who are not devotees and not in that state. And are there any tools we can use to kind of help us along the way when we deal with the normal world?
The feeling of universal love and compassion appears, the end point, which you said can automatically be obtained by devotion. It appears to me that the devotee sees Krishna everywhere and in everyone. Yes, that's true. Very difficult to see him in non-devotees. Actually, when we develop to that stage where we can see Krishna everywhere, we see it in non-devotees as well, actually. But that's a very elevated platform. Very difficult to see him in non-devotees. How can we go about doing that, particularly people who affect us negatively? You see, that state comes about through purity. The purer we are, the more we look beyond the material body of the person and we see spirit soul and super soul. The more the purity comes, the more we see that. In fact, what happens to a devotee is they become paradukha-dukhi. They become, because in our state, we're kind of like, we get a kick out of it when other people, slip on the banana skin, or, when we see suffering in others, we're not always so compassionate. But when we develop substantially as a devotee, we feel the pain of others, actually. So, we're not so bothered about whether somebody's a devotee or not a devotee when we develop. But in the interim stage, when we're developing as a devotee, at least theoretically, we should try to understand that by comparison with ourselves, that everyone is suffering, actually. In the way that I'm suffering, everyone out. And you only have to sit in a place, say in a shopping center, and watch people and just see what's on their faces. People are suffering like anything. So the way my spiritual mastery says, there are devotees and those are waiting to become devotees. And you know what they're waiting for, Vishal?
Go on.
They're waiting for you to come and help them.
Yeah. No, I can.
It's a fact that everyone is a devotee, it's just that some know it and some don't.
Yeah.
So we have to go after the ones that don't know it, like a loving brother or sister, and offer them, Lord Krishna, in a way that they can accept it. And if you do that with people you'll have some sense of how to do it, So we should at least theoretically understand that, everyone is either a devotee or waiting to be a devotee. And if we can help that person become a devotee, that's so wonderful, actually, because Prabhupada's vision was this is for everybody. This is actually for everybody. It's not just for people in Indian bodies. Tell you that. It's actually for everybody. We have to try at least theoretically develop that vision. Okay, they may be non-devotee, but a few years ago I was non-devotee. So what can I do to make them into a devotee? I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what came to me. Let me just read it again and make sure I've got it. The feeling of universal love and compassion appears the end point. Yeah, but at least we can try and develop that understanding, But at least let me try to be compassionate as much as I can. It's not always going to work, because we're still somewhat covered by the material nature. But as we develop more and more, that compassion should be there, actually, paradukha. Whatever pain is there in others, oh my goodness, look at what that person's going through. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. He wrote 50 songs about Sharanagati, the process of surrender. And in one of those songs, that's what he's saying, you know, that when we actually become devotional and we feel other people's pain, we're happy for them when they're happy, and when they're sad, we feel their pain. Whereas the materialistic thing is that when others are happy, we're envious, and when somebody's in pain, we're happy. So we should at least try and work on that paradigm. No? Understand. You know, I'm sure others have made you a devotee, isn't it, Vishal?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Some other devotees have helped you to become a devotee?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got Kirtika here who I connect with a lot. And
yes, Vishal, you have to pay it forward. You know what that means?
No.
Not pay it back, pay it forward. In other words, go and find a few others and give the gift to them. No.
Yeah.
I try and do it to my children. Actually, that's where I'm starting with.
That's great, because as a father, that's your duty to make your Krishna conscious. But you have to do it in a very loving way. Don't force.
No, not at all.
12 years, and I know you mustn't force. Just set a good example, and encourage them with whatever they do. And then if you set a nice example, the children will follow automatically, actually. Vishal, I deviated.
Can I just add to that, please, the one Prabhu was asking? I was in a very complacent place, and it's the most awful place to be. And, you know, since I took up Krishna consciousness, which is like about a year ago, I actually developed a beautiful mood to think about everything as good. Behind every mood, Krishna is there eagerly waiting to support everybody. So if you can believe that, and don't allow the mind to separate you from Krishna, because the mind is always there to pull you apart. So befriend your mind and be grateful for every response, and be ready to take up negativity as good. You know, take it as a good sign, because it's actually showing you how to make changes and be better at what you do. Srila Prabhupada is also behind you. You gradually receive great sense of purpose, which is the key thing we're all looking for. So I think that is very good. And, you know, Prabhu, please don't give up. You'll be fine. I have been there when I felt deflated and didn't want to carry on, because I think, where is the answer? I'm doing all this and it's not working. But if you keep on, your perseverance is fabulous. It really gets you somewhere. So I am feeling a lot more at peace than I was before. Thank you. Sorry, Prabhu, I'm taking up so much of your time, but
thank you very much.
Feel I have to share.
Thank you. Okay, Vishal, are you happy with the things that have been spoken?
Yes, very happy. Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. There are no more questions on the chat, and I think we have also exhausted our time for today. So, as you have gathered, we have devotees from all over the world. We have devotees from London, from Manchester. Dr. Vishal Agrawal is from Manchester, a real good devotee and with real great realizations. We have Jolie Mataji from very near the manor. We have Vivek Prabhuji from Congo. Some of the devotees are from Nairobi, like our mentor Mansi Ganga Mataji, and most of them are from Eldoret, and why not? So on behalf of everybody, Prabhuji, from all over the world, from all corners of the world, we'd like to pay our humble obeisances, Prabhuji. I'll hand over to Path Prabhuji. He has a small ceremony.
And we were missing you.
Yes.
We were missing you, Shashin.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your wonderful session. Also, we are so grateful you are coming on every Sunday, and it is a very, very interesting session. We are so grateful to you, and it is very much interesting and enlightenment also. It's nice, wonderful classes. So I request everyone, please unmute yourself, and for glorification of His grace, Shyamanand Krishna Prabhu, please chant Hare Krishna mantra once. Please join with us.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama.
Vancha
Sindhu
Sindhute
Itanam Pavanam
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Namaha.
It's Shyamanand Prabhu ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Hari Bol.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Tomorrow we'll have Madan Gopal Prabhuji. So same time, same link. Kindly please join if possible.
Thank you, Shyamananda Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Hare Bol. Prabhuji, you are okay for tomorrow, yes? Oh, Prabhuji is left. Okay, I'll stop recording.